The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
To provide some expert guidance to all of you in how you move forward communicating iGive, how you tell stories in general about your nonprofits and causes. So again, I'll definitely let you read the slides, and I'll touch on a few points that are really important. You know, PR, the world of PR has changed a lot thanks to search and the internet. It's affecting media. We've just had another painful round of media layoffs, and a lot of the people are becoming freelance writers. So building relationships with these media early on is really, really key. And in your local market, should be relatively easy, right? Because you do something unique, you're benefiting the local community. And so even to just introduce yourself via email to media can be such a huge difference at the end of the day when it comes to getting coverage. But with that said, there are fewer media. You've got fewer people doing more of the work. So it's taking a little bit longer to get responses from media. So don't get frustrated if it takes, 2 or 3 touches or follow-up emails to get in touch with them. I think it's really important to remember that people in general are not getting their news in the same place. They're getting it from social media. They're getting it from news outlets. They might get it from a roundup email newsletter. So really thinking about your PR strategy in terms of all of the places people are going to find your story. And we really at Cascade talk about this idea of content or storytelling for search and discovery. And for you, that's an important component as well. We'll talk about it more in depth. But, if people are looking for volunteer opportunities or they're looking for organizations like yours, everything we do, we want it to be searchable. And we're really moving into this idea of authenticity. Google in particular is very big on authenticity. And I know that AI, ChatGPT, all of that has been huge news lately. Try not to get distracted by it. It's a great tool to help you maybe kickstart a press release or a blog post, but don't rely on it. You want to definitely go back and make your story very authentic. So again, let's take a step back, content and search, and really making sure that you're providing everything from a content perspective that media need to tell your story. That could be video, it could be an infographic. Oh, infographics, and I'm sure Lidia will have something to say about this too, but infographics are huge for media in particular. They love the stats. They love the information. It's easy for them to print. Graphics, especially in digital and video, are very important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, the whole point today with PR is we're getting away, we've got the traditional PR still in play, but we're really looking at it from a standpoint of how do you create overall story content that is searchable and discoverable across multiple channels. And I'm pretty sure that there'll be some questions about that. Certainly we at Cascade have sort of been innovating a new model. So feel free to ask away. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. It's definitely sort of a new approach. What's really, really cool, I think, about nonprofits, and I've sat on boards, I've sat on fundraising committees, I've generated PR for fundraising events here in Chicago as a volunteer. So I really understand that one thing that separates you from a lot of businesses and really gives you a great edge is and are the human interest stories that you have to share. So pets, I've worked with the homeless and the mentally ill in particular, and done fundraisers for all kinds of large organizations as well as smaller organizations. And those human interest stories are key to you. So flushing out or understanding what stories you have to tell and how you're going to tell it and why you're going to tell it. right? So we talk a little bit about timeliness. Timeliness is very important. You don't want to just go out and tell a story that might be evergreen. We call it evergreen, meaning the journalist can tell that story at any point in time. We want it to be timely, right? So when you contact media, you want them to produce the story or write the story or interview you right away. So one of the ways that we do this well, not all the time, but sometimes if it's relevant, or if we feel like the story is just a little weak, we'll look at a National Awareness Month. And we'll say, how can we use this awareness month or week to really push our story? I guess push is the wrong way. Let's say position you. And really use it as an opportunity to spread word about your organization. This could be anything from, breast cancer awareness, we all know those, as well as, we just did a campaign here in Chicago for Black History Month with some Black entrepreneurs. That was really fun. And the reason it worked is because it was timely. So definitely keep that in mind. And I think with the why, as a journalist myself, I can tell you that journalists are always asking the question, why? So if you send them an email pitch and you're not telling them why it matters or why your story matters or why this human interest story using maybe a person who benefits from services of your organization or family, whatever it might be, if you're not telling them why it matters, they're not going to pay attention. So we really, stats and statistics, we use a lot just right up front to tell them what the impact is. And that's another unique thing for nonprofits, is that you're able to use that information to really push the impact, your local impact. So then we put all of that stuff together. You might consider producing a B-roll package. It can be expensive, but less expensive than actually a produced video. If you can find a good partner locally who can help you with that. Again, the data-driven graphics. So you can take those statistics and information and put it into a graphic or infographic. Obviously, photos, anything that you can use from a visual standpoint that's going to make an emotional connection, because that's really what it's all about, right? Everything that we do and you do as nonprofits is really about making that emotional connection to draw people in and get them to take action. So that's a really important part of this. And then putting that entire story package together, you want to think about it as a strategy for the year and really understand how you're going to use each element. So you've got the story, how are you going to use it in PR and email and your blog, your social media, and what is the timing on all of that? Because you really want it to be coordinated to all go out together. And then I think it's the challenge sometimes, but I think with human interest stories, if you have more than one to tell, is to be able to give media in your market different stories. They don't all want the same story, unless it's like a really big news about a big grant you got, or maybe a fundraising event that did really well. We really try to give people different stories as much as possible, just for the exclusivity, but it also creates engageable content for them. And that's something, back to a previous slide, that's really important to understand. And you don't have to move the slide, but that's okay. You can go back. Yeah, you can move forward. That's fine. So one of the things that we really pay attention to is giving media something that they need, right? We want to build those relationships, and they're looking for stories that are going to create curiosity, engagement, and that's what helps them sell ads. But for them too, we're going to talk about searchable content now, but for them too, searchable content is really important, because if they have a great story and it's searchable online, it's going to just continue to drive clicks and engagement for them. So as much as it's important for you to bring traffic or people into your website through this sort of a search and discovery process, it's equally important for media. And the great thing is that media websites are higher authority. So if people are searching for an organization like yours, those stories are going to pop up first. And I think, you know, we talk about the credibility that PR can offer a company. So it might seem a little strange that we're putting such an emphasis on this idea of search, but at the end of the day, the goal is to drive traffic to your website. And how do we do that? And we look at PR from the searchable perspective to help drive that traffic. So if people are going to see that story and let's say the Chicago Tribune, they're more likely to click through and then visit your website, right? So you've got that credibility factor, but now you've got that link back into your website. That's going to help. And unfortunately, search is everything today. You know, I don't know how many of you can go 5 minutes without being on Google searching for a movie or a recipe. In my house, we use Alexa as well. So it's a really big deal. And I know it's kind of a new concept, but it's relatively easy if you just sort of don't think about it too much. And just understand now how your entire integrated storytelling campaign really can work for you. What is searchable content? This is how we view it here at Cascade. We're really CPR as searchable content, as well as your blog, social media, video graphics. Something that I didn't put in here, I think might be kind of obvious, is your website. So you want to ensure that you are writing in some extent with keywords or idea of what people may be using to try and find you, but you want to do it authentically, right? Like you don't want it to be like going back to the chat AI. You certainly don't want to rely on an AI or chat GPT to write that content for you. You really want it to feel authentic and meaningful to your organization and tell those stories that you really want to tell. And I think, you know, keeping in mind that idea of authenticity and meaning is really key. This is one of the big topics in the marketing world, at least on my side, when it comes to now engaging people. And I think remembering who your audience is at all times and what the purpose is really important and will help you ensure that your content and your stories and everything you're putting out is really authentic and meaningful. The blog, I am going to step back to that for a minute. Your blog is really, really important. You have great opportunities here to not just make it a newsroom. Your newsroom should be a separate page on your website, but your blog can tell a lot of stories. You can hear post your own human interest stories on a regular basis. I like to think of it as a magazine, right? So sort of a magazine that's everything about your organization are relevant to it. So if you work with pets, maybe you do a top 10 best gifts for your pet for Valentine's Day. So you can play with it and you can have a lot of fun with it. And really, no matter what your cause is, I think you can still have a lot of fun with it. And that's what's really authentic and meaningful, engaging to people. And over time, it creates just a better story. Again, you know, Google is going to recognize this authentic content first, even though there is some conversation. I was just reading an article about how AI may not be affected by Google, but I think over time, you know, Google's job and a journalist's job are quite the same. Their job is to bring you the most timely information, accurate and meaningful content and stories that they possibly can. And I think the most important part when we look at the benefits of PR, but then when you put together your PR with all of these other avenues, you really can establish better relationships with people who may then become interested in volunteering and donoring, okay, or donating. And as we move into announcing iGive, I know that there's kind of a lot to go through there. But I think it's important to lay that foundation before we move into this so that you have a really nice understanding of where you go from here. You know, announcing programs like this can and has been a little bit traditionally difficult for nonprofits. You know, iGive itself as an organization has a better chance of being able to tell that story.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm gonna interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Betty, and she's talking about messaging and all these tools. And before you talk specifically about iGive, are there wrong times to market a nonprofit or a story? Which I think actually is an interesting segue into the Amazon Smile conversation.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Here's the thing about PR is best laid plans can never compete with global events or acts of God or hurricanes, right? So obviously those are bad times. You can't predict them, but maybe you can work around it, or you can put it off until another time when it is equally meaningful. I tend to, from a news standpoint, and if there's something really big going on the news, that we know that the journalists that we want to connect with are covering, we will not spend our time pitching them at that point. So that's a really good question. Being sensitive to what they're covering. I think in particular with local TV news, that's going to be a bigger thing to consider. The newscasts are limited in time and they're very tight on their timing. So, you know, if you have a great story, but there's a bigger local story, you're going to get bumped for it. But don't give up. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, okay, so circling back around, so with iGive and Amazon Smile, it made a lot of sense for us to get out there and get some stories for iGive. And we know that some writers are still looking for alternatives. So I think it's an interesting time in your local market for yourselves. If more than one of you are as a nonprofit or agencies working and signed up for iGive, it might be an opportunity for you to actually partner. Media love roundup stories, so the more organizations or the more people that they can include in a story to really set the framework for a new trend that's happening, the better. So I know that it can be difficult if you're in the same market and you're all trying to compete for the local media, but maybe it's an opportunity for you to really look at how you can tell your story differently and still have some meaning. iGive is definitely an opportunity for you guys to develop an integrated story campaign approach using your PR, email, social media, your blog, all of that. So if you can think about it as, let's just sit down and put together an approach and timing for each of these and when they're going to go out, you're going to have a better response from also media in your community, but also your donors. We have put together for you a Swiss cheese press release. We call it Swiss cheese because it has holes in it. And there are holes that you can fill in to customize it and make it more authentic or feel a little bit more true to your nonprofit organization. And I know that iGive's going to be sharing that with you guys. And you'll note that there are some areas in there where I'll say, hey, you know, here's a great place for you to insert your compelling story, or do a few sentences or a paragraph on a human interest story where you could actually name somebody or give an example of your work. And then use some data to show the local impact of your work. And again, the data is really, really important. That's a good reminder. I think a lot of journalists sometimes when it comes to nonprofits forget about the good work that you all do in your communities. And this is a good way to get them re-engaged. We have found if you have some local outlets like a patch.com, you may not have that in your area, but there is, we're seeing a push towards hyperlocal media and at least support for hyperlocal media coming back. Some of these outlets are relaunching as nonprofits. One of the things that I said earlier, and I mentioned in a slide, but I'm gonna say now, it's really important that you support your local media outlets by subscribing to them. You know, kind of scratch their back, they'll scratch your back. And they do sometimes take contributors as writers. And I think that that's a unique opportunity for you all. If you can find a position like that as a contributor, you can really put some thought leadership forward in your community. Again, social media, use that iGive infographic. I think it's attached here for you as a handout. And you can create your own on Canva. And both of these you can use in your email marketing, your social media as well as your blog zine. Again, use your blog for that thought leadership and to build that community and your video websites. You can do a pop-up on your website that says, hey, you know, we're now offering iGive. And with this special announcement at the end of this webinar, that's going to be something really fun that you can create a pop-up on your website. Can you scroll down? I want to make sure yeah, okay, great. So this is a great example of a local nonprofit communicating their switch over to iGive. There are a couple of things to note here. In this community, I believe that this particular institution, this library, is a landmark, so it does make it maybe a little bit more interesting. And I invite you to look up the story. I think it's a really great example of how the PR department here at the James V. Brown Library went about getting this story produced and online for North Central PA. What I really like about this, and one of the things that I think we all like about the Shop to Give programs, are that they can produce unrestricted revenue. And after sitting on boards for a long time, I understand how really valuable that unrestricted revenue is outside of all the grants and the requirements that come with all of this funding. So reiterating or helping people understand that value of unrestricted revenue and what it can do for nonprofits and your organization in particular is really key. It does feel a little bit like it's straight from a pitch or straight from a press release. So again, this example, I would follow it because the author here, the journalist Ashley Little, it looks like she basically cut and paste this entire story. So that is a perfect example of us giving the journalists what they need. I would rather them copy and paste and maybe reformat a press release, but you know, if they get all the information in, that's fantastic. That's still a hit and a win for all of you. And because of that, you know, it was really easy for the reporter to write. I did want to share another example of some PR. This is from a much broader perspective. I was on the board for a local organization working in the with homeless and the homeless and secure here in Chicago, which sadly continues to be an issue for us. I happen to, you know, I have some benefits being in PR. I have some resources that I use, and certainly you can sign up for HARO. It's still a good resource for you. It's free, and it can lead to opportunities. This one actually came through another service that we actually pay for. And Vox was working on a story on this impact of the pandemic on homeless and how the pandemic had caused so much more homelessness. And so it was a great opportunity for me to insert the executive director as a thought leader into the article, and he was quoted several times. This actually also resulted in some local media interviews here in Chicago, and showed how we could position the organization as an expert. The executive director is an expert, but also the organization as a whole as an expert on homelessness and their model. So with that, I am done. I'm sure you're full of questions. I'm going to turn this over to Lidia now.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me. Great. So let's talk about branding now. So let's talk about how branding plays into developing the story around your nonprofit organization. So first, just a little bit of an overview on branding. So branding is how people perceive and interact with your organization. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So brand is expressed through visuals and messaging that create an emotional connection with your audience. And that emotional connection is what we really want to kind of talk about today, and what I want you to sort of tap into as you are creating your stories and the brand that is around that story. So a successful brand is developed on a framework that is based on who, what, why, and where. So here you can see I've presented it as a visual. So who are the people that you serve? What is the problem that you solve? Why is the reason that you exist, and where is surrounding all that? And those are the ways that you express your brand. So we're looking at your brand as a whole through these 4 elements. And now we'll talk about each one a little bit more individually. So who is your audience? You know, in marketing speak, you may hear it referred to as your audience. These are the people that you serve. So these are obviously people who are receiving services from your organization. If you are selling any types of products, the people who are buying those products. These are your donors, your supporters, fundraising partners, advocacy partners, as well as your staff and volunteers. Branding also plays into, you know, attracting the staff, your team, and the volunteers. So you want to keep that in mind when you're thinking about that audience, that who. Now, the what is the problem that you're solving. So this is, of course, literally that problem that you're addressing in your nonprofit's mission, the situation that you are making easier, how your organization is making a difference, what people can expect from you, this unique expertise that you're sharing, like Jennifer mentioned, you know, in PR, you're sharing that expertise, your ED, you know, maybe a thought leader in the community, and then unique aspects of your organization. And now why? This is the part that I really want to spend a little more time on thinking about. Why is the reason that you exist? So this is why your organization was founded. So this may have been, you know, an event that happened, or, you know, a spark in the founder's mind, in their vision. But this is that really core reason that the organization started. So of course, then in the why, we're also thinking about your mission and vision. We're thinking about your organizational values. We're thinking about that story behind your nonprofit, the unique experiences that your nonprofit has had and the people on your team have had, and then also the long-term effect that you wish to have in the community, in the world, with what you're doing, with the work that you're doing. And then also why people choose to work with you. You want to start to think about that, and then why people should believe your brand promise. So now we'll talk about the where. So that's that kind of surrounding area of that framework that we talked about. And these are the ways that your organization is expressing your brand. And we also talk about these as touch points, because you're kind of touching your audience in these different places. So these are, you know, the first 4, you know, are quite typical. I'm sure all of you have those: your website, your social media presence, your email marketing, your donation page. But I also want you to consider, if you're not already doing these things, considering content marketing. As Jennifer mentioned, having a blog is very important for nonprofits. Having that thought leadership out there, again, to build your brand awareness, and then any unique landing pages that you're using. So maybe if you're doing social campaigns, You're bringing people into a specific landing page for them to consume that specific content. So now let's talk about using that framework to tell your story. So you want to build your brand strategy around that framework, around the who, what, and why. And that is called your brand positioning. So some of you maybe have that, maybe have formally written it, but it's basically, it's more of an internal document that is guiding your marketing, your communications, your brand, basically. It's the story of your brand. So you really want to, if you don't have that documented, written down, you really want to make sure that you're considering that who, what, and why, and you have that documented somewhere, because that really is going to drive both your brand messaging as well as your brand visuals. So with your messaging, again, go back to that who, what, and why, and think about how you can tell your story. So the impact your organization is making, success stories, that why portion of your brand strategy. And then you want to make sure that you're customizing messaging for each audience segment. So that's your who. And I'm sure, you know, nonprofits, there's always more than one audience segment. There's multiple generally. And you're not going to be changing your branding, but you want to make sure the messaging is customized for each of those audience segments, depending on who you're talking to at that moment. And then you want to focus on how you can help, how you are helping. That's the what portion of your brand framework. And then next, it's really important to use your audience's words. So you don't want to be speaking in a way that, you know, they won't connect with you, or in the worst case scenario, they'll be turned off. So you really want to consider your words, how you're putting it out there, using your audience's words, making that emotional connection. That's what I mentioned in the beginning, how branding is really all about that emotional connection and making things resonate, making your organization and your mission resonate with your audience. And you want to be authentic and real and honest when you are developing that messaging. Okay, we can go back. Thank you. So now let's talk about developing your brand visuals. So again, go back to your brand positioning, go back to that who, what, and why, make sure that's really well defined. And then you want to make sure that your logo and your brand elements are used consistently across all digital and print channels. So I know a lot of you are using both, right? You have your digital channels, you're also doing print fundraising materials. So everything should be consistent across all those channels. And as you're developing your brand, you want to make sure that colors that you're choosing, that they relate to your mission, that it makes sense, that it resonates. You want to make sure that the fonts that you're using are expressing your brand's voice. You want to make sure that the imagery, the photography, the graphics are reflecting your mission, reflecting your audience again. So we talked about using your audience's words. Now we're talking about using photographs and graphics that the audience will relate to and that will resonate with them. And ultimately, you want to tell your story, your why, through imagery. You want to really get that across to people because imagery, especially social media, videos are really big. Images are big on your website. People connect with that. You want to make sure that you're telling your story accurately. And then lastly, you want to strive to educate and engage. So you want to show pictures of people, activities, what your nonprofit is doing, the impact you're having, but then you want to bring in those infographics like Jennifer mentioned. It's really important. People really connect with that data, that real data that shows how you're making a difference. So find a good way to kind of balance both of those in your brand visuals.
I'm going to pause you real quick, Lidia. I have a question from Carolyn. She does not have access to professional photos and a logo designer. What is your recommendation for more of a grassroots or a cheaper? Are there alternatives that she can explore?
Yes. So definitely, I know that, I work with lots of nonprofits, so I know that it can be a challenge with budget for imagery, for getting imagery. As far as logos, I would say, if you don't have the budget, wait. Like, don't just throw something together that's not going to look good. It's always better, I think, to have something that's just a simple typographic treatment than trying to get a logo thrown together that is going to do the opposite of what you want it to do. So that's something that I would say, try to find a way to get the budget to develop a logo, you know, work with the designer and make sure that they can really express that mission. But in the meantime, if you have to do something typographic and simple, that's fine, you know, just to kind of get you through. As far as imagery, I do know that, again, you know, it's nice when you have that photo library. You can hire the photographer. If you can't, you can look at stock photography. There are some there are a lot of really great stock photography options out there. I will include, I don't think it's on my list of resources, but I curate a list of diverse and inclusive stock photography sources. Some of them do have free resources, but it's a great place to start if you need something for your nonprofit. It's a great place to find imagery that will be, you know, more real and accurate if you can't find, you know, if you don't have a photo library of your own. And then also, you know, everybody's got a phone, and phones take really great images, and you can apply filters to images you've taken on your phone. You know, graphic designers like myself, we can sometimes take those snapshot images and make them look better, enhance them, add a filter, you know, do something to make them look better. So I would say, you know, encourage your team to be taking images themselves when they're at an event. But definitely, you know, like I said, I will, Kim, I'll make sure I share with you that resource for those diverse and inclusive stock resources, because I know that will come in really handy. But yes, thank you for asking that question. And I think we can move to the next slide. So here's an example. I wanted to show an example of using branding to tell your story. So here's an example from Giving Tuesday. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with Giving Tuesday, probably, you know, maybe even takes part in their initiative, but they do a really great job of telling their story through their branding. It's all very consistent. So you can see here, I've taken a snapshot of their website, their logo, their social media from their Instagram page, as well as an email and some email marketing. But you can see that everything's very consistent. So they are using their brand colors in a really great way to keep everything consistent. They're using imagery in a really powerful way. So they're connecting imagery with the text on their website, and that text directly relates to their mission, directly relates to their brand positioning, their who, what, and why. And they've always done a really great job of using this combination of imagery. And again, this is probably not professional photography. So you can see, I'm sure that photo at the bottom, you know, with the volunteers, that's probably not a professional photo. So you don't always have to have professional photography. It just has to really be real and authentic and make sense and resonate with your audience. But they also do a good job of engaging and educating. So they're engaging you with these photos, but they're also educating you with infographics, with stats, with testimonials. And it's, you know, it's clean and it's simple. And as we move on, you'll see, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice for creating that type of clean, simple, consistent brand experience throughout all the touch points. So I'm going to review, I think, just those first four, because those are, I think, most relevant to most nonprofit organizations. The first one's your website. So most often it's that first brand experience. It's how people first experience you. And you want it to really tell your story and really resonate. And so, you know, as we know now, mobile's key. Those pages do need to be optimized for mobile. So I've pulled in some stats from the various reports that I read throughout the year. Mobile devices are now the majority of nonprofit website traffic, 54%. This is a new change. This is an M&R report from 2022. So make sure you're optimized, your pages are optimized so you can get that organic traffic, which is the goal, and make that strong first impression. Make that emotional connection through visuals and messaging. So like we saw with Giving Tuesday, they do a great job of doing that in a really simple, concise way. Visuals and colors are key. We want to keep the design and the UX simple. We don't want people to be confused as to where to go on your website. So it's, you know, definitely key to have strong images, not a lot of copy, but just enough to get your point across and navigate people through the website. And then lastly, make sure that you are adhering to all the web accessibility standards. If you're not already, WC3, I think they're wc3.org, maybe .com, that's a great place to start. So next is your donation page. And this is a big one. Branded donation pages raise more money. It's been shown. There's, studies. I read these reports every year after year. I can see donors are giving larger gifts to those branded pages rather than generic pages. They're raising more money. Make sure your page is branded. Make sure it's consistent with your other digital presence, your logo, your colors, even graphics and imagery is present there. Now, these pages are goal oriented. So you want to have that prominent CTA, that call to action, which is of course donating. But you also want to keep them interested and help them learn more about your organization so they're more likely to return. And, again, another stat here from Classy that one-time donors who started on a donation page will return, maybe more likely to return than those that are on P2P campaigns or at a ticketed event. So brand that donation page, make sure it looks really great. So next, email marketing. Donors like email. This has been shown again year after year. I see it in the reports that the majority of donors want to stay in touch with you with email. So make sure you have those email campaigns. You're doing at least monthly. For most nonprofits, monthly is a good place to start. If you need to increase that frequency, you can do testing to do that. Start with monthly. Nonprofit open rates also trend high compared to other industries. So take advantage of that. Use those emails. But emails are a great place where you can get that attention in a short time. So you want to make sure that you are personalizing it to your segment, as we talked about it. Think about your who. Speak in your brand voice. Think about that voice, and again, the words that you're using. Make the content scannable. So headings and bullet points are really important in emails, as well as graphics if you need to kind of direct them to a certain place. And then visuals. Use visuals to humanize your content. As we saw, Giving Tuesday does a great job of that. They always include, at least maybe one or two really great either photos or graphics. Don't discount graphics. It doesn't have to always be a photo. It can be a really powerful illustration or a graphic. And then you want to have that primary CTA, call to action, and not too many calls to action. People will get confused and go away. And then integrate it and brand it with your other channels. So make sure you're connecting your email marketing with your social and even like those peer-to-peer campaigns. All right, and then we have social media. So social media, again, year after year, it's showing that it's a top referrer to fundraising pages. So you want to make the most of it. People are going to be coming to your page, from social. Focus on the messaging and visuals. Make the visuals strong. Make it consistent, recognizable, with your other branding. Again, we want to personalize to segments. So you want to make sure that you have campaigns that are speaking to those different audience segments, and the visuals and messaging is personalized for each. And again, data shows Facebook remains the top channel. That's been the case for several years now, but something to keep in mind, LinkedIn and Instagram are showing some higher conversion rates than Facebook. This is from Classy's report last year. So don't discount some of those other social media channels as far as in creating a presence on those channels as well as Facebook. So as I mentioned, I've got some blogs for you to read at your leisure. I will add that stock photo resource as well. And now I'm a couple minutes over, I'm sorry, but I think we do still have some time for questions.
I think we're fine on time. We have 10, 15 minutes, and if we get lots of questions, and please ask questions, because I know we all love answering them. We can stay a couple minutes long as well. And again, this is being recorded, so if you do have to leave precisely on the hour, we will post the playback with captions, we believe, later today or tomorrow. But first, Kim has an announcement.
Before we get into the Q&A, a real quick announcement that our new member $5 shopping bonus has been extended. So you may be aware that the promo was scheduled for ending on March 1st. It is now ending March 31st. So what that means is anyone who joins iGive to support your cause between now and March 31st and makes a purchase within 30 days of joining will earn a $5 bonus donation for your cause. And that's in addition to whatever the purchase would normally generate. And those rates obviously are on iGive on a per store basis. So if I were to shop at Kohl's and I earned, I don't know if it's 2% right now, but I'm going to use that for my sample, a 2% donation on my new swimsuits, then I would also earn a $5 bonus donation if that was my first purchase through iGive. So be sure to, in your emails and on your socials and the specific landing pages that we've been encouraged to create, you are mentioning iGive and this time-sensitive action that your supporters can take.
All right, to get to some of the questions that we have, and again, we want more. Adrian asks, what is a reliable PR service to use? Are there any that are free or not too pricey? So when she says PR service, I think she means a PR firm. So how does one engage services for the least amount of money practical?
You know, that is the big question always, right? And I know that budget is always an issue with nonprofits. You know, luckily, because your target is really your local media, this is something you could actually tackle on your own. Just be very thoughtful about it. You can build a list of media yourself, and then when you have a story that you're ready to pitch to them, hopefully for them to write about, you can just take an hour to do that. Follow-up will probably be about 10 minutes. So for you, I think that it would be, it's always better if you can do it yourself. I am a big believer that when it comes to hiring services of a PR agency, that you kind of get what you pay for. Another option for you, though, would be to hire an intern or bring an intern on. However, they're going to need guidance. So you can always pick up my book if you need some guidance, or you can certainly visit my blog. I have a lot of information about PR and pitching journalists there as well. As far as additional services reaching media, Haro is free. You can get a free version of Quoted. I'm going to put that in chat here for you.
Just to clarify, Adrian did say specifically wire services. Is that what the Quoted, and is it Hero, or can you type that in the chat as well? Thank you.
No, these are not these are not wire services. In fact, we really don't use press releases anymore, FYI, unless it's for search. I don't pay to have it posted online unless it's a huge national partnership or something like that. These Quoted and Haro are sources for journalists who are looking for either sources or experts for stories. So if you're looking for broader exposure, that's a good place to go.
And was it Hero, H-E-R-O, or what was that other one besides Quoted?
Oh, it's Hero. Yeah, you can search "Help a Reporter Out."
Aha. Thank you.
And that will certainly take you there as well.
Lidia, we have a question from Jean, who asks, when you have multiple audiences, when you have the who problem, and you sort of highlighted that, how do you rank them against each other? How do you choose who to focus on, or should you?
Yes. Well, I think that you want to sort of rank them, I guess, in importance. So, you know, of course, donors are going to be high on the list because, you know, all organizations have to have donors. But then I think you might want to look at some of those other audiences and see, you know, how much, you know, which ones do we need to spend more time and effort to reach? There may be some audiences that you already are reaching in a pretty good way, you know, so maybe you can say like volunteers, we already have a really good pipeline of volunteers. We don't really have to worry about that. So maybe you don't have to develop an entire persona around it, but you just know that, yes, that is one of our audiences and we will speak to them. So I would say to think about, you know, which audiences are most important to your organization's mission. And then that's kind of how you would rank it as far as which ones, and it's not that you'll focus, you know, not that one is more important than the other, but it's just the focus and the type of content you're putting out. So maybe for the donor audience, you're spending a little bit more time. Of course, most organizations probably are, because you're doing, you know, your yearly fundraising campaigns. excuse me, but then maybe that other audience of, say, like partners, maybe, you know, for them, maybe you're reaching out to them a little less frequently. You're not doing as many campaigns maybe on social media for them. So it's just a matter of which audiences are most important to fulfilling the mission, and then how often we'll be speaking to each of those audiences.
So I actually have a follow-up question on that. How would you distinguish branding for a nonprofit different than you would for a for-profit? That is, what do you do differently for a nonprofit than you do for iGive?
Yes. So, you know, I will say that I take a lot of branding inspiration from all types of organizations. So for-profit and nonprofit. I work generally with nonprofit and mission-focused organizations, but I'm always looking at what everybody is doing just to kind of get a sense of, you know, what's working, what's interesting, what's new. So I would say it's maybe not all that different, except that, you know, nonprofits are mission focused. So of course, you know, there are other organizations, you know, or like products, or, you know, something like a Pepsi, you know, they're more focused on, you know, it's customer focused, it's in the public eye. So it's kind of a different, and they don't have that mission focus. So I think that with nonprofits, we're always looking at how are we expressing our mission? We're looking at how are people connecting with us. But other even for-profit organizations, they're doing things in a similar way. They are also trying to make a connection and resonate with their audience and making sure that the values are aligned. So I would say that it's different, but don't discount, you know, those for-profit brands, and look at them and see what they're doing, especially on social media. You know, it's fun to kind of see like what those big brands are doing in social media and think about, hey, how can we apply that, you know, to our nonprofit? You know, there may be something they're doing that you can also do that's fun and unique and interesting.
Excellent.
Very cool. Thank you.
I'm going to finish us off with one question that I would like both of our guests to answer. So about 35, 40 seconds each. Sheen wants to know, what do you do when your emails are not being opened? Jennifer, can you start us off with some ideas?
Yeah, so, and I'm sure Lidia will back me up on this as well, but one of the things that we find in marketing in general, if you're advertising or emails, if it feels like if they're sort of missing the mark, you need to revisit your messaging. If they're not being opened, there's something going on with your subject line. And I find that subject lines, in PR today, you know, long gone actually are the days when I used to pick up the phone and call a journalist. You know, everything is sort of done by email today. So those subject lines are super important, just to create the curiosity to get people to open the email. That's always a good place to start. Now, if you had in the past been sending emails and you were getting opens, you might revisit the design. If the email itself, when people open it, doesn't sort of meet their expectations or engage them right away, as soon as they see it in their email box, they might delete it, because now you've already set sort of the expectation in their mind of the messaging, the story, and the branding that they're going to get. Lidia, what do you have to say?
Yes, I agree with all of that. I would say also look at your emails to see if they are targeted to your audiences, because if those emails are going to everybody, then there's a good chance that they're not going to open it, because they're not going to feel like this is for me. So make sure that they're segmented and they're going to the right audience, because I know in my experience, like I work with a lot of associations, and we see that those emails that are really segmented are getting opened because they know what they're getting, they know what to expect, and the content is very relevant to them. So I would say check that. I would also make sure that your email, like Jennifer was saying, like branded well. Not overly, don't put too much in there. You know, keep it very scannable and easy to read, and then go back to your analytics and see what people are clicking. I always like to look at that like heat map and see which links they're clicking in your email. And that can also give you some clues as to why they're not engaging, because maybe there's just not enough in there for them to click and be interested in. Maybe you need to hyperlink more of your content to get them interested, to move them over to, to your website. So that's my 2 cents in addition to Jennifer's.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's worth way more than 2 cents. And we thank everyone for joining us today. There is a recording that will be posted to both iGive's YouTube channel and our support portal. And I have contact information if you'd like to get in touch with Jennifer or Lidia or with either of us here at iGive. And have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from or what time you're watching the replay. Thank you, everyone.